So now we've discussed what I consider and what I think is apparent, that the rigidity, the validity, the usefulness, the utility of these states of matter, solid, liquid, gas, are a little funky to say the least. What to do with them, well, let's just explore. What is the difference between a liquid and a fluid? Linguistically, they both have that UID, which is very similar, so they have the same base word. Pretty apparent. What's the difference? A liquid or a fluid? I don't have a good answer for you just off the top of my head, putting myself on the spot. We're against segregation versus separation. You know, you have that historical difference, but liquid or fluid? I don't know, but right, so why is it liquid in solid and not fluid in solid? You see the ID and the UID for both liquid and fluid, and then the ID for solid. And so what's the natural opposite of solid? Is it fluid or is it liquid? But we have another, fluid, fluent. And so again, preserving that syllability, what is fluency? If you go learn a language, when do you classify, you say you're fluent in a language? Right? I'm literally teaching you an axiomatic word in English. Do I know every English word? No. Can I describe every physical phenomenon in English? No. Right? So again, just demonstrating that you just have to get the basis to prove. You don't need to learn everything in history to be able to learn something new today. But fluid relates to fluency more so than liquid or liquidity. Right? Then you can draw that difference. Liquid to liquidity has clear definition in economics. Right? Liquidity of access to cash, or a liquid-like asset, something that can be readily returned to currency. And fluid does not have, more fluid goes to, if you said a fluid motion, a continuous motion, something that's smooth, something that is in rhythmic motion. Rhythmic motion is fluid. It's a very fluid motion he went through. You're referencing rhythm. So now it should be very clear that we're always referencing these fundamental physical properties, because that's what our words are literally based on. But fluid flows. And so if you don't know, we didn't have a good answer, that was a lie. Fluid flows, right? So we showed how alliteration, simply because it starts with the same letter, but when you have alliteration, you know you're closer to the logical base before it was differentiated. So because fluid flows is alliterative and liquid flows is not, we know that fluid is more closely related to flow. So now you can find any context that the word flow would be used in, and the more readily available logical word that you should be used, or that would come to mind, would be fluid. And so you can kind of use these, backtrack these clues of alliteration now indicates more closeness from where it was differentiated. So fluid is more close to flow than liquid is. But again, you can say liquid flows and no one's going to be like, that doesn't make any sense. But what is, to give us an indication of fluency, what is affluency? Affluency is well defined as wealth. And so again, when are you fluent in a language? Kind of a sidetrack, but really not really. I don't even know what you mean. Like as long as you can articulate most of the things you want to say, like if you can learn, I would give my working definition of fluency for language specifically, or if you're talking in the context of learning a foreign language, is really just if you can learn new words from context. Because like I would say I'm fluent in English. Let's just start with that one. And so I can, again, and I'm really pretty apt with words, but there's a ton of words I don't know. But if I can listen through a context and then pick up what the connotation or what the meaning of the word is based on the context, then I know enough English words to learn new words. So I would define fluency as that. Super workable, that is not rigorous, that is not a complete proof, that is not this rigorous mathematical axiomatic derivation we're doing, that's Brad saying. That's what I would consider fluency. But again, the inherent relationships and proofs that are within dimensionless analysis or geometric linguistics is independent of me. And so, obviously I'm developing it, but you can still, like I said, fluency, my point is fluency has a natural definition, like we've covered with every word is naturally defined. And you just have to go through all of this logic to rigorously axiomatize one, right? And so it's pretty crazy. But fluency, that's what I would define it as, when you can learn new words based on context. Because you're learning words based off of the words in that language you already know. But orality relates to fluency, right? You vocalize orally. So we discussed other activities you can do orally in the previous episode, like eating food. You sick people. But again, what is fluency? What is the connecting word of fluency? I want to say it's sensorality, because you can, like, then I always have to play into my intuition saying these words aren't random. There's a reason I'm thinking of these words. And so fluency, I'm going to say, is to sensorality, but then again, it's not specific enough to be useful. But it's an open question I just have in my notebook. Truancy is the opposite of punctuality. If you're right, I want to use punctuality because the operative phrasing is on time. Right, if you're punctual, you're on time. And so if you're late, you're truant. So truancy is not on time. On time is punctuality. Truancy is typically used in a relation or in a school context. If a kid doesn't show up to school, he's truant, or tardy. But if you don't show up at all, you're truant. And punctuality uses on time. So I just have words that reference timing. Not much to say there, but again, punctuality, on time. Rhythmic motion is in time. And so when you're in time, or when you're thinking through, again, trying to use that preposition through. Intuitively, it's definitely right. Why is it right? I can't articulate it to you. But if you're going through a cavity, right? Cavity is the word for through. Like if this is going through that, what is it going through? It's going through a hole. What gets bigger the more you take out of it? A hole. It's going through a cavity. A cavity is a hole. So I don't know what gravity is. Haha, just kidding, I do. But a cavity is a hole. And so when an object goes through something, it's going through a cavity. But again, just why is that preposition so fundamental? Something to do with, again, an independent system going, not bonding or interacting with the system, but passing through it. Again, I just keep using that word, and it was super operative for the derivation of speciality. And again, I'm doing this derivation live. Like I said, I have light notes here, but all of this I'm just looking at the camera, pretending it's a person and talking to it. And so, in the same way I can derive something completely, like first impressions matter, first derivations matter. Right? We talked about virginity, just simply being exposed to something the first time you remember it more. Same with derivations. And so you can not remember every single step of a derivation that you've already done correctly before, just like anybody else in calculus. But I said my intuition always just backs up and the right words just pop up. But that's just kind of a fun fact. But the word through is super operative. I'm not sure what. When you say through object, it is through a cavity is the word that you're going to use. Don't know how to progress the logic past there. How does sensorality work? So now we're going to, again, use our logical substitution. It'll be on the screen. But right, we ended with the last question, what is work? And then we also said, right, we also have what is sensorality? And we also have another question that everyone always says is what is life? So we're going to try to plug those all together because we have our form of our solution that's already proven. It is what it is. And so now we have to fill in it and what. We've shown you that, but now we can just say, how does sensorality work? Because remember, this word is going to relate to a real physical process. And so we just ask the question, how does sensorality work? We start with it is what it is, and then we just say, but result is independent of the individual. And so again, anybody can use this form of the solution. But so we said, it is what it is. What is it? Work. What is work? So we said, we just put that into our solution. It is work. It is. Right now you change the cadence. It is work. It is. Almost like a comma at the end. And then you just have the two variables, sensorality and work. And that's proven to be valid because of the stability of two. So, when we have sensorality, that's the definition we're trying to find. Sensorality, 5 syllables. 3 dimensions is the open dimension, right? And more generally, just 3 elements. And so, 5 syllables, again, kind of 3, 5, and 7 are our prime numbers. 7's kind of like the maximum, where you start over, iterate, again, not super solidified as to what it is. 5 is the defining, because it's the next prime number after 3, and it's 2 away from it, and 2 was the previous thing. So you have the stability of 2. So my point being is the definitions of orality and sorality are definite. They're solidified because they're the first 2 bases iteration. Sensorality is the dynamic definition, meaning it's the form of the word that is going to change in relation to other words changing. And this is over a large-scale evolution of language. And so, the what was I saying? But we plugged it in. We plugged it. It is work. It is. But then we have that other variable is what is life? Again, another thing, a very accessible question, but nobody can really answer it. Or we can just use those things and we can say sensorality relates life to work. And then we can put what is it? It is life. What is what? What is work? So life is work. Life is. See how that makes sense? It's not really like a caveman might say it. That's the point. Then you speciate. Then you expand the definition with more letters. But that's literally kind of a form of our solution that we're working through. Because remember, we've related sensorality through the term work. And so sensorality is clearly a bigger word than work. So it's going to generalize the concept of work. But life is work. Life is. It makes sense. But that's again showing you the direct iteration. And if people think this is super specific, it is. Again, the first time I did this was over email because this stuff is not that interesting. But I'm showing you because it should turn light bulbs on every little facet of the logical process to do this proofing. But sensorality relates life and work. What is hard work? People say that phrase all the time. How is work hard? But then we can extend our definition. We can make a jump, use a different word. Hard work is difficult. Sensorality determines difficulty. If something's difficult, it is sensorial. You can literally feel it. If you're thinking of something you can't understand, your brain will literally feel sore. If you go to the gym and work out, your muscles will literally feel sore. So again, just plugging all this stuff together. But related difficulty and sensorality, orality and sorality, again, those are the stabilized. Again, in the same way, strings frequency is the characteristic of R1 that is stabilized, that is still with us. And then energy is the concept, or light if you want to use that word sometimes. Still, fuck light. But, so energy is the concept, and now we're in the state of momentum, where every black body radiates, we exchange momentum in the pressure gradient. And so, but relating that fundamental stability of two physically from those universal phase evolutions changes to physical definitions. Right? And so orality and sorality, and so because then we've identified a specific form of a solution in our form of the axiom. Sensorality, sorality, so if we can define sorality, defining sensorality would be trivial, since sense is the functional definition of sorality, or sensorality being sensory. Everyone knows what senses are, it's just, again, spelling the word with a different letter. but the sorality definition should be one-to-one stabilized, and once we show that, again, extend the definition, boom, done. And by boom, done, I mean only 8 continuous years of derivation at this level. And the last time we had my whole life at this level, but since literally showing people every step I can possibly write down. It would probably be since that was 2017, so I don't know, 8 years? Yeah, awesome. Sweet. But so that is what we're doing, again, just showing you each step of this process of this new proofing method that I discovered. And by discovered, I mean I was intuitively doing it before I was forming words. Sweet. But the definition of the first two, the base, orality and sorality, right? Orality is clearly defined with vocality, or just orality, something oral of the mouth. Sorality is we're trying to find now, and then axiomatize it with sensorality. So again, can we make a numeric statement saying all axiomatized words are in the form of ality? Probably, almost certainly, but I haven't proven that. So on and so forth. We can make a huge reduction, right? Way back, literally the first or second episode of this whole series. Because again, look at the timestamps on these videos. Vibrational information theory, lecture 1, was timestamped 7-8 years ago. I'm carrying the whole logic. I'm doing this derivation all day. But all even-sided n polygons can be reduced. So any word, linguistically, any word with even number of syllables cannot be axiomatized. Because all even-sided n polygons cancel. I just put cancel in quotations because of geometry. Odd number n polygons have entropy, or they mathematically represent an entropy. They're entropic. And so what I mean is, you have a triangle, again, the distance from that any vertice, an equilateral triangle, from the top vertice to the center is longer than from that center to the opposing side. And so if that's a force vector pushing this way, the atom's going to go this way. And then if it rotates, it's going to go that way and that way and that way, and then you're jiggling, and that's how you get vibration physically, geometrically. And so if you're even-sided, all of the vertices are equidistant from the center, so the force vectors all cancel out regardless of where it's at in its precession. And so that's the same why in the last episode I talked about how cycles can complete and do complete, but not at the same physical location. What I mean is because mass creates space. Right, the perihelion of Mercury or whatever, where it's like, it's going around like just first geometrically, our triangle, right? If it pushes this way and then it rotates a little bit and pushes this way and then pushes this way, it's going to move, it's going to precess. It's never going to get to the exact same physical location because of that entropy, because of that disorder. And so you can cancel all even-sided end polygons saying they're completely geometrically symmetric, and that's not physically real. Symmetry doesn't exist, chirality does. But odd number polygons have entropy, and then so like in our axiomatizing syllability is 5. I think so. I've not proven that, but again, to my level or to a rigorous level, but you guys have never seen a proof at this. So it's really hard to differentiate for me what I'm intuiting, what is proven, what I've proven before, what is being completely new. But I can feel it. Like I said, the words have feeling. And there's certain spots where it's very, very apparent. Other parts where it's kind of just like, logically it's the same, but linguistically it's different. And then just focusing it all, trying to get to the axiom. But I told you we are going to end with a physical conundrum, and we are. And so, because we've proven that there are no logical paradoxes. That is true. And so here is one. Is water wet? And I'm sure somebody snorted and retorted, and I guarantee you've not given a complete physical definition because nobody has. So if you just answered that and laughed and scoffed in derision at all of the stupid people, is water wet? If I touch something that has moisture, I perceive wetness. I think water's wet. If I touch water, I get wet. Water comes in contact. Wet. Your girl was wet at my house last night. Just kidding, I don't get any girls. But is water wet? And my point is that's a physical question that has a physical answer. And so what is the logic behind that? But again, just progressing our logic, trying to find our definition of sensorality. We have related it to work. We've discussed entropy, where all of the pieces are coming together. Just keep plugging forward and see what we get. So thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.